Hold up.
How's that?
Yeah, I think so. Can you guys hear us now? You should be able to hear us. I could see the speaker going on. Let me
Okay.
check.
Can you guys hear us okay? Okay, great. So yeah, so welcome back to another episode of Voice in the Hollow. Can you guys hear us?
Yeah, they
Okay,
can.
cool.
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So yeah, that's weird. So this is like a weekly journal showing the breakdown of a film that we're doing entirely in Unreal. Let me just show a few things here. So we're just doing this entire film in Unreal. Very small team. Tran and I are doing the majority of the work, and then we have some amazing friends jumping in and helping us with certain things like rigging and blend shapes and some animation on some of the shots. For the most part, all of this is motion captured, a motion capture suit that we bought to do this. And yeah, we're just figuring out how to get all this stuff to look good on our own and putting this together. So every week we're just showing the progress. So you can see it for those of you that do recognize some of this, just seeing some of the shots coming together. The lighting is starting to work. The animation is all coming together. So yeah, so every week we're just showing
The
the
progress.
progress. Yeah.
So we're at like a stage where it's like hard to in some ways show what we're doing because it's like we're figuring out the editing and the story, right? So that's what you're working on a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then seeing if it reads, rendering it like, does this work? Does that work? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So some of these shots, I'm very happy with the way they're working out. And this week, some of the stuff that I've been doing is messing around with the Nuke to, sorry, the Unreal to Nuke bridge. Um, right now, I have all of this stuff rendered, but I know that this is not going to be like the final look of it. So just trying to figure out how that works. The Foundry just released that plugin, so we could plug all this stuff directly into Nuke and adjust it. Use the crypto mats to color correct things. The only thing we found is in order for that plugin to really work well, you kind of have to rebuild it inside of the program in terms of depth of field, motion blur. All of that has to be done entirely in Nuke because the beauty pass will render with motion blur, but none of the utility passes like Z depth, crypto mats, ID mats will have any of that. So if you already have a depth of field on there, if you already have motion blur on your image, the images are not going to line up. So you have to render it with nothing and then apply all that stuff in Nuke. And we have a little bit of time. I might show that at the end. But I almost feel like I myself need a little bit more time before I'm ready to show that. But yeah, one of the things I'm going to be talking about today is one of the shots that I have here. This one here, you can see she doesn't even have clothing simulated yet. The lighting is not working, so I'm going to relight this shot and get it to work. Um, it's not very exciting at the moment, so we'll talk about like some of the progress in that, and maybe break down how we lit this shot here, which I actually really like right there. So that just that running sequence. There's a lot of things going on there, like light functions and change from darkness to light, which I really like. So we might go over that. But Tran is going to start up, and she's going to talk about one of the cave scenes we're working on. So Tran, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. So how do I? Okay, I just click on my screen. So this is what I'm working on right now. You guys can see the shot. This is basically the happens at the end of the story. And this is inside the cave pit. So if you saw some of the stuff Miguel was showing you earlier, that was it. She walks up close to or towards this hole, and this is what the inside of the hole is going to look like. So for me, all I have so far is this. I mean, I could talk about like how I thought about lighting this stuff. So the first thing I did before assembling this was just grab a bunch of images of some scenes, right? And I thought about, okay, so what is going to work and what doesn't work. Um, Obviously, something like this is too bright, right? So this is supposed to feel like a dark hole. It's supposed to feel ominous, not really like magical and bright, something like this. So maybe I thought, okay, so these more dramatic ones like this, where there's a lot more black. And I also really start to gravitate towards imagery like this and this one here, right? Pull back. I also have this one here, which I really, really liked because you could feel the depth of it. So it's just my reference gathering from here. So thinking about that, I don't always draw a lot before I tackle it. I just think, okay, we gotta tackle this. So if I pull back here, let's create another viewport. You can kind of see how I've laid this out. So up here, that would be the cave hole, right? And I just have a bunch of planes just to kind of block the light like this. But you can see all my light sources are shining inside. So that's the primary light. And then over here, let me change my camera speed. What I did was I have a bunch of rocks that I thought, I'm lay out and I can use. This kind of helps me start assembling everything together. And, I find this pretty handy. I noticed that this is like a thing, a lot of gaming artists use, and it makes a lot of sense. Without it, I don't really know how to organize my scene, or I'm not quite aware what rocks I have available to use, and I can very easily just keep using the same rock over and over. So this helps me lay that out. So the first thing I did here is establish where, okay, this is where my hole is going to be. And then as I start laying this out, I started thinking about like, okay, what I really want visually. Let's go over here. Let me grab a pen on my screen. Is I really want this tunnel to read, right? Kind of this long feeling. So I blocked out my geometry to show that. And sometimes, let's see if I can get this in here. Let's turn this on lit. When I'm doing this, I do this a lot with two screens because it's very hard to do it in one, right? So you can see I've laid out this in kind of like a cylindrical type of shape. That way it's going to hold the light down. And then once you get, past this rock wall where it feels really round. So basically, hold on, grab my pen. Feels like it's going around like that. It's just going to be open. Okay. Let's see some of the questions. Yes, these are all mega scans. Oops, that's the wrong one. Let's see. Just reading some of the comments, sorry. Let's see. Looking really atmospheric, amazed it's real time. The main caves while sculpted or made multiple large rocks and they make sense. Yeah, so these are actually all mega scans. I haven't sculpted any of these. The only things that are actually custom made are these stalactites that Miguel made up here, right? I did try to do some research thinking about like when first doing this, should we go for a more stalactite type of look? But stalactites kind of, I have a complex feeling about stalactites. Like I think they're really cool, but I think they're actually really hard to make because they can really look kind of crappy really fast. And really blobby. Like if you look at this, you know, I feel like if I sculpted this, it would look like mashed potatoes. So I kind of wanted to stay away from like a cave that was super heavy in stalactites. And Megascans doesn't really have assets of any of this stuff. So knowing that, I went more for just like a more rock type feel here. Okay. And then just keeping it pretty simple and just having a few of these guys customized just to make it feel a little bit more dangerous. Now, once I've laid this out, kind of when I look at this, I wanted to give it some kind of dimension and depth, right? So I really like this one a lot. But I think I might change it a little bit just so that it's not so close to this. But basically, if we break it down, the shape is kind of reads like this, right? And then everything else here is really black and dark. Out here. And then you have, you know, this main area being the light. And then it just kind of fading out in this region. But this kind of reads like a whole. And it's actually kind of tricky to light it that way because you really have to make sure your black values read, right? So sometimes when I'm lighting it, I can get a lot of spill on this, meaning like I can overlight and I can end up pouring light into all these areas, which I don't mean to do. So while I'm lighting and laying this stuff out, I really want to make sure. Let's turn this off. That this area, you know, remains pretty dark. And then in here, again, I'm just thinking, okay, this is going to be like kind of the tunnel main light. So basically, you know, breaking it down, it's just three levels of black. The outside here being really, really dark, right? The center being the lightest. So kind of just three regions here. And I'll show you a couple things. But again, I'm not sure, you know, if I want to go with this. I'll probably, you know, talk to Miguel a little bit more about what he thinks story-wise and compositionally, what will look good. Let's just kill some of my lights here. The one thing I'm thinking about is maybe not going, because I'm not sure, not going with so much just this whole kind of shape the way it was before. So let me turn this light on and off. I don't know if you guys will notice if I have this light on and off, what that's doing. Let's make this larger. So initially, you know, my lighting looks more like this. This is kind of my center. This is my main beam, right? And then all this back here should be married like as a black hole. I'm kind of thinking of opening it up with this light here. So you can see before and after I turn this on, it's pretty subtle. I'm thinking maybe compositionally changing this so that it reads more like this. So this, instead of being like a hole, kind of like this hook shape. The center of my light is still doing this. And now the kind of the middle ground light, not the main one, is having this shape. So those are my thought processes. I don't know if any of this really makes sense, but that's what I'm thinking while I'm framing. I'm thinking about my black levels, thinking about the composition, and then just trying to bring all this stuff in. While I'm, you know, as far as like how I laid this out, And my lighting, let's come back here. Again, I just basically started with the main tunnel structure. Once I had that, I just started framing it. So you can see this mass piece here. It's actually pretty simple. And this kind of shape here that's in the foreground. Right over here, that's giving me that hook shape. But it's not really anything that complicated. And as far as once I have that, I don't have, a lot of lighting. I do have a HDR backdrop going on here. Not sure it actually really contributes to anything. I probably will get rid of it because it doesn't really do anything. So even without it, it looks fine. And when I started lighting it, the first thing I did, let's just strip all my lights, was I just created one main light here going through the hole at the top so that I can have this beam. And I really want it to feel bright. So what I started doing, instead of like just taking the same light here, let me just duplicate this because I'm gonna break this. And let me put this in a group so I don't destroy my scene. So I have a light coming down here and it's sort of working, and usually by this point I'm trying to move all this stuff around, just trying to get the shape, but you can see the tunnel is not really there. So my first thought is like, oh, maybe this is not bright enough and then I can make this brighter. Say something like that. But it as I can increase this brightness, kind of starts blowing out a little bit and you're kind of losing like this tunnel shape. So instead of doing that, what I started doing was just taking the light and duplicating this, right? So I have a duplicate right now on top. So I now have two lights. And instead, what I do is I just will take this, change the cone angle of that. Increase the intensity. So let's just make this, hold on. Let me just throw this in the folder here. And what I did here is I just decided, let's put the volumetric scattering really high on my second light. Maybe it shoots down too far, right? So now I have this light shape that's doing this weird thing. I really just kind of want kind of more focus right here in lighting. So let's just see what it looks like without it, right? So you can see it's really even. It's not quite what I want. So I'll take that, change the attenuation. So now it's more focused up here. Narrow the light with the cone angle. So what that's doing now with this second light, it's just giving me this, right? And then this just gives me, a little bit more focus here. And then the other thing that I find that's kind of tricky to control is I want like kind of feeling like a God rays, right? So the first thing I tried to do to get God rays was just try to put like things obstructing the light, because that's kind of how it works, right? Like if you have a light, like a sunlight shining through trees, for example, light goes into the cracks between the branches, and then you're going to get God rays. It doesn't really work that way very well when you try to do that in CG. Sometimes you can get it to work, but it's pretty hard to direct. So I did try to put like vines and stuff, but the light just blew right through it, so it didn't do anything. So the other trick that I tried to do is I'm gonna take my main light. So I have two lights right now. So this main light and then this like little beam light that gives me more focus. I'm gonna take my main light and like duplicate it. And then what I started really doing a lot is just using light functions, right? So if I come to my material, let me go over here. Give me 1 second. My content browser here. I started creating, I did this initially. We did this for the exterior scene just to get the feeling. It's like a global where the trees are going through. But these are pretty handy just to get some kind of streak, right? So I can start, let me just duplicate this one so I don't ruin my regular scene. And I'm going to take my light here, my third light that I already have selected, and I just throw it into the light function. And I'm just going to turn off these other lights so you can see what this is doing. So this is my third light. And you can see just by putting this light function, it's giving me these streaks. If I load this up, basically this is what it's doing to my light, right? So wherever it's black, no light's going to shine through. And then wherever it's white, light's going to shine through. So it basically gives me a bunch of spots. Once I have those spots, you can see that I have those streaks, right? I can play with this. So I have a tiling that's on this. It's basically just a tileable purlin, so nothing special. And then I have a contrast. So if I go over here, just reset my contrast and reset this here. Is it updating? It should be. And if I slide this, say something like that, you can see I don't have my streaks anymore, right? Because I've reduced the contrast of my map. It's just white. But as I increase this, that starts to give me more streaks. And then I can change the tiling. So if I did something like this, you can see the streaks should be finer. They're not really that visible. So I can go smaller, 0.5, changing the tiling on the map here, which then will give me just kind of a different feel. So I just played around with this type of look. Let's actually boost some of this light here. I'm just bringing up the volumetric scattering because the volumetric scattering affects the fog, and that's going to make the streaks look more dramatic. So you can see here, I have something like that. So let me just bring it up really stupid high. That way I think you can see how this is updating more, because I don't think it was making much sense. So this is what I'm playing with here to get my breakup. And you can see this is showing much more. Hopefully you guys can tell through the streaming how that's giving me this kind of look. I don't really want it to be this dramatic. I just kind of want some kind of feeling, right? Let's turn on the other lights. So here's my original light. And then here's my center focus light. And then I have this ridiculous God ray light, which I probably want to turn down to make it a little bit weaker. That was too weak. It's jumped from like 1,000 to like 100. So now I have something like that. Okay. Once I have this, I start wanting to fill in my other lights in the scene. So let's turn these on here. Main thing here is like I'm not reading the shape of my structure very well, right? So I start placing these lights here just to pick up the rim of the rock. And you can see this one here. This one picks up the rim around here and just giving me a little bit more lighting here. And this one here.
Thank you, Swizzy.
And all this other stuff here. So I have something kind of like this. Now, once I've kind of picked up some of those lights, I started adding a couple more lights. It looks like I'm missing one of my rocks. I think I hit this by accident. No, it's right here. I just have my light kind of bouncing through, or my camera's moved. Let me change this real quick. Well, I'm glad I didn't save because I think I just broke my scene. But let's pretend I didn't break my scene. Once I have that, I start filling in paying attention to my shapes. And again, I'm not sure if I want to open the shape up so much. We'll come back to that. And then the second thing I started doing when I was like, how can I up this a little bit, is initially these guys didn't look like this, right? If I come back to my reference, like I like the way the light hits these rocks where they feel kind of specular, like a little bit wet, right? Like here you can see like there's little highlights on this one. Maybe that's not the best colors. Make this pink, right? And I really kind of like that look.
Suggesting detail.
Yeah, suggesting all these details. So these rocks here have a different material on them that I've assigned, but initially they looked more like this, right? You can see it's really flat and it's not really picking up. So what I did is I just duplicated this Megascan one. So it's not one I made, just came from the bridge. And I want to duplicate it because I don't want to mess this up in case I'm using it in another scene, right? So I just assign the same duplicate that's more dry. And then I load this up. And then under max roughness, I just want to make sure this feels more wet, say something like that. So that picks up more light. That can be a little bit intense, right? It could be too bright, for example, like that. But what I can do to turn it down is just change my specular. So your roughness controls the shape of your light, like how far it spreads. So if you look up here and you're looking at this highlight, this is what I'm thinking. My roughness controls the spread right here. And the smaller it is, you can see this shrinking, this highlight right here. And as I bring it up, you can see it's really broad. So if I go back to 1, it's so broad that I don't have any. So I just bring it down. Now, once I bring it down, I might decide, okay, this is cool over here, but these are really strong. You can change your light intensity to lower the brightness of this. So if we're looking at this, these look really white. Or you can just change your specular value, right? So if I check on my specular over here, you can see it's default 0.5. If I set this to 0, it basically wipes this all out. I don't have to put it at 0. But say if I go 0.3 instead, I still have the shininess of it, and I can control the intensity of the light or the brightness by my specular. So as I'm bringing this down, you can see I'm still getting that, but it's not as bright, right? I don't want it to be, what I don't want is I don't want these highlights to compete with this. This, I don't know, I broke this scene, but just ignore this spot. I turn off autosave before I do this because I know that I'm going to break my scene when when I try to break it down. Like I already, it's not really not correct. I have to reload this to make it correct. But in any case, the brightness is where we're going to look at, which should be here. There's a little silhouette here, which I'm worried that it's not reading very well. So what Miguel is doing, it's pretty hard to do this inside Unreal. Miguel is doing is he's working out how to make nuke work. It's very easy to do it in compositing, and we don't want to drop the compositing aspect in our workflow because it can simplify a lot of stuff. But in either case, none of these highlights should ever compete with that, right? So if you look over here, there are these little lights here, but they're not as bright as the center light over here. So those are the things I'm considering. Then over here, basically these rocks here, they're all super wet. So, and they all have duplicate shaders. That way, when I load this same asset into a different scene, it's not all super shiny. It's only shiny on the duplicate shader here. Now, once I had this, I thought, okay, this is cool. And I kind of noodle around with this a lot before I get to where I think that the lighting is working. But how can I like up this? Like I like having dimension in color, right? But this one's pretty tricky. has a blue cast to it. So I started looking carefully at some of these other references. And what I notice here, and say like these two images, so you have like brown rock, right? But there's a lot of like kind of a red warm spill. So if we look up here, it feels really orangey, right? And I don't, this could be some other light source that's inside this cavern that they set up here. I don't know exactly where this is at. But to me, it feels pretty natural, right? Like you also have this warm spill here, and you have a lot of this warm spill going on here.
It might also be an HDRI image that there is that bounce, but it's super overexposed in those areas, and then they're like art directing that.
Yeah, maybe. But also in here, right? And this is probably a flare, like a lens flare. I think I'm pretty sure it is. But there's some warmth in there. And then there's warmth in here. So what I did to try to bring in subtle dimension was I just took a bunch of lights and made them red. So if they're not, I don't know how noticeable you can feel this is. Let's see. Let me reset my camera. But if you look, there is a little bit of red. And I don't want it to be intensely red, right? So it might be hard to see through the stream. But over here, there's all these little subtle
I could see it through the screen.
red coming in. And that's just to bring in more dimension to it and maybe make it feel a little bit more ominous. So those are done with couple lights just shining through. Let me turn this off here. While I'm doing this, I'm also trying to think of my values. So I have this light on here that I'm turning on and off, which you can barely tell. And it's only set to 16. I can bring up intensity so you can see what it's doing, right?
Can I answer a question someone
Yeah.
just asked? What kind of render passes do you use for compositing? Very simple. We're just doing velocity, depth, and cryptomat. That's really all. There's one that is all reflections, which basically sets everything to kind of chrome. We might use that, but that's basically it. Okay, sorry. Go.
Yeah, so, that's totally fine. So I have this light here. It's giving me some color. At the same time, I'm also thinking in value. So aside from the color, when I look at this, I do have this edge, right, of this light, like this highlight shape like this, right? But what I really want, again, making sure is this whole area, always feels dark, right? Everything in this region always feels darker. So this is giving me the break, but it immediately kind of, when you look at this value over here and this one, they're kind of almost the same again. So what I'm doing with the light here when I flood this in, aside from getting red, is I want to lift it up a little bit. So now this whole area is slightly brighter than this whole area here, right? So those are my thought processes when I'm bringing this in, and I'm doing this here with these other lights. So let's see this one. Let's up this to like 1000 so you can see, right? It's giving me some spill underneath, some dimension, and at the same time, what that's doing is kind of lifting this area up here. That way, again, I can make sure that this area here remains pretty dark. But of course, I don't want it to be this bright. I just want to do it subtle because all the reference images that I'm using are very subtle. And then again, the last thing I'm contemplating here is maybe not going for, let me change my color. like a hole anymore, but maybe filling it in with this light I have right here. And it's maybe too subtle. But you can see as I lift that up, what that does is instead of this shape here, it gives me something like this. You know, well, anyway, whatever happened to my stuff up here originally. So they're just compositional ideas. Anything you want to add, Miguel?
No.
The next step for me on this is just to go to closer shot. Let me open up my sequence.
Is it true that animation is becoming even more popular than ever? I have no idea.
Let's
Since
jump
the
over
pandemic,
here.
I'm not sure.
So here's like a close up that I'm currently kind of blocking out, right? I want some rock shape up here, and then this will be Koa. This one's going to be more work than I think the Y shot. On the outside, there's all these vines. When you can see some of the shots Miguel was showing, right? So outside the hole. So it really makes sense if I have some kind of vine work coming along in here.
I could show that real quick if you want us.
Yeah.
This is the exterior. You can see the vines.
Yeah, so there's all those nice vines. It definitely makes sense to have the vines on the inside. Vines are a pain in the butt. So the way I would do this, let me show this other scene. Let me make sure I don't save this. Let's go over to Whole Master. Don't save. Which I don't know why it's taking so long to load. So while that's loading, let me just jump into SpeedTree. So there's a few tools that I tried when it comes to the vines, and I felt that it was best just to do it with SpeedTree. And let me open up kind of the outside hole, and I'll be doing this the same for like the interior of the shot I'm showing you. Give me 1 second. That should be loading. But anyway, basically this is the outside here. Okay. And my vines are these right here. Oop, wrong one. Give me. Okay, so that's without the vines, and these are with the vines. I like this workflow that I use, but I think a lot of people would not like this. So, you know, it works for me, but it might not work for a lot of people because it is kind of funky. But there are some things I really like about this. So what I do here, let me hide all this stuff, is I bring in a low version, a very low version. If you try to do this really high inside of SpeedTree, it's going to be really slow and it's going to take forever just to do, like move a branch or do whatever, right? So there's this feature in here. Once I have this low mesh, it's called hand drawn. So you can actually just hand draw some kind of tree trunk if you want. The way you would do this, let me switch over to the mouse because the tablet doesn't work, is if I mouse over this circular area and I hold space. Hold on. Let's do this first. Let's just establish this trunk right here. Let's hide this. For some reason, it's not really working. Let me just create generator. Right, so I right click over here and I have this tube. Now, once I have this weird tube, I can draw from here. But let me scale this up in length. Okay. Now, once I have this, I can mouse over a region here, hold space. And as I hold space, I just drag and click. And then I get something like this, right? Now, if I hold space again, I can just drag out with my mouse wherever I want this to rest. So it's one way of doing it. And that could be really popular, but it can be pretty hard to control. So what I do instead is you can also just control the points. So what I do instead of doing every single branch is I just do kind of the main ones. So let me just lay one over here. And let's make this thicker because I don't think anyone can see this. Okay. And let me just throw in a color just so it could be more visible. I'm just going to drop it on top of these. SpeedTree is all node graph based, which I like. Okay, so now I have something like that. Now, I don't actually try to do every squiggle in here. So I might say, okay, I want a branch or a vine to grow like in this direction like this, right? And what I'll do instead of trying to draw all like the bumps, because that could take a really long time, is if I select this generator, which is this right here, and I go to my options over here, if I go under spine, I can apply noise, right? So I'll apply a noise, say something like that. And you also have, it's like a purlin, you have a frequency. So if I make the frequency really high, you can see it's really, higher frequency. I can just lower it. But what that will do is just kind of give me some kind of curve. Now, if I come back here to my node, I only have 2 points. And let's say I want to reroute this. So I have this little dot here and this one. I can click on one point and I can add a point before or after. This menu will just come up automatically. So say I add a point before, and then I can grab this and just rest it along here. So the longest part really is just kind of laying this out like this. Once I have this, and I think it looks good, what I'll do instead of continuing to draw it, and you can tell that they're hand drawn, because if you look at the icon down here at my screen, there's like a little hand. I can right click, add geometry selected, and I can say, hey, I want to put other things, different little things. Let's say I put branch tubes, right? So now I have all these branches, and the problem is they're not really corresponding with the surface. Now, when I select this, I'll have all this control here. I can change my frequency. I can change my count. So right now, 3 means there's like 3 branches on this axis. I can change it to like 2, not 22. Say something like that. Go back to my spine and just kind of give it some kind of angle. Now it's still not corresponding. When I import it, but there's this feature here, when you import geometry, you can turn it into a force, right? That force means that all these branches can be attracted to it. So if I select on this branch here or this node and I go under my forces here, I can tell it to be attracted to that surface. And you can see now it's all trying to stick to it. So I get something like this. Once that's nice, and I can play with my settings here, right? So if I come back here, I can say, change the angle in which it lays, change this here. I can go back here, change my frequency of the branches. I can spread them out, things like that. If I like what I have here, I can copy this, Control C, Control V, and I just drop it in here. And then it would produce sub branches like that. And you can see they're all attracted to the surface. Now, again, the longest part, let's hide this, I just hold H, is actually just laying this out. So if I hide this here, you can see I have this trunk. The trunk here is just basically to get my branches to grow up, because everything starts from the center right here. So I have this mesh. I need a way to force it to forcibly grow up here. And then what I did then is I laid out these branches like this. And I did a secondary one of drawing it. So these are all hand placed. And then these are hand placed. So I have this placement here, right? It's not complex enough. And then the rest of these here are just procedural. And they are all just attracted to the surface. So that's how I do that. It takes a while, but I think it looks a little bit better. Like vines, when they don't have like leaves, there's some advertising. Hold on.
Let me block them.
Yeah. Okay. Oops. There's still one here.
I'll do it.
Okay. So that's my workflow for this. It's pretty simple. Basically, hand drawing it out, placing the points until it looks good. It takes a little bit of time. But the nice thing is art directed. These secondary ones, which you usually would take the longest time, are just automatic and procedural. And they just kind of grow wherever. But they do need the help of these to know where they're supposed to go initially, right? Otherwise, it'll just kind of, sit in a corner. So that's my workflow there. You want to show some stuff?
Yeah. Okay, so this is the shot that we want to go in and light. So right now, the way we really dealt with this is we lit the overall map. There's one sunlight, and that's kind of the only light that we have at the moment. There's just one sunlight, and what you see is kind of what you get. And you can see as she's coming out of the forest, she's being hit by the sunlight, but I'm not happy with it yet. I want it to feel like there's more light peeking through the trees here, and have the light feel more like a sunlight when she comes out here. So first thing I should say is I work with two monitors, so it's going to be a little hard for me because I'm trying to put this all in one screen here. So it's going to be pretty tough. But first thing I'm going to do is just go into my outliner, and I'm going to find my sun, and I'm going to drag it into my sequencer. So the sequencer is a way of me adjusting any one of these components on a shot-by-shot basis, this being shot, run to Baba, close-up, right? So this is a shot, and now when I throw the sun in there, whatever changes I make to this are not going to affect the overall sun on the other shots, okay? So if that makes sense. It's almost like a copy of it. It's not really a copy. It is the one, but it's the changes that I make will only be applied to this one scene. So there it is. So you can see I have my sunlight, and I could just go to track and go to transform. So that's basically saying, hey, adjust the transforms of the sun on just this one shot, okay? So I'm gonna come over here and you can see that I have my sun right there. And I'm just gonna rotate it and see what I get. If I rotate it around, and let me just come in here a little bit. I kind of like how some of that light is peeking through there. I'm gonna keep rotating it and see. I really like how it feels when it's backlit. Kind of liking this over here. Okay, so if I'm happy with that, I'm just gonna come over here to transform and add a keyframe. And you can see that it places a keyframe on the location, rotation, and scale. Okay, so there's my sun. One thing that's a little bit weird, the way we have this set up, is we have a secondary light that's kind of just affecting the fog. And this is called my fog, like the light fog. And it's basically the same thing, but it's just affecting the fog only. It's a little hack that Tran came up with. So all I have to do here is nothing hard. I just have to go to my sun, copy my rotations, and then when I go to my fog channel here, I'm just going to paste the exact same settings. And I believe that's already there. Okay, and then I'll just go to track, transform, same thing, just add a keyframe to that. Okay, so now if we move this across, we'll have that. That's cool. But now she's coming out here. Wow, there's really no sunlight here. So maybe this was not the best of ideas, the best angle. So I might actually rotate this back to this. So let's do that. I'll add a keyframe here. And now I need to make sure I delete these guys over here, or else the sun is going to rotate mid-shot. So I'm going to copy this position here. Paste this over here. And we'll set a transform here. And again, I'll delete that key. So now we have that right there. Okay, cool. So let's go back into the forest here for a second, and let's see how do we make this better in here. So you can see it's pretty dark in here, which I kind of like. But one thing I want to always make sure is that the brightest point is the furthest away. So I'm going to create a spotlight here. Zoom out a little bit. And I'm just going to place this guy all the way in the back of here. I'll move him in here, bring him up, rotate him just a little bit like so. Okay, so you can see that not sunlight, that spotlight is now back there. And I'll increase the intensity, something like that. Okay, so you can see we have our intensity up here. And I'm going to go to my volumetrics, scattering, and I'll set that to like 100. Okay, it's going to be way too bright. Okay, but I want a lot of fog in the back, so that's okay for now. So I'll go to the intensity, and I just bring that down, bring that down, bring that down. Something like that.
Is Unreal Engine a great tool for animation and modeling? Or is there another software recommended?
It's great for rendering. It's not great for animation or modeling.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely not, especially for modeling.
Yeah. So that spotlight is this guy over here. I'm going to drag him into my sequencer, And I don't want this light to appear on all the other shots, because if I put it in every other shot, all of a sudden we jump to this shot over here, and there might be a weird spotlight hitting her from the back here that was only intended to be in this one shot. So I'm dragging that into this sequencer, and I'm going to right click and go to convert to spawnable. That means that light is only visible in this one shot. Okay, so you can see we have that nice back Steven Spielberg 1980s light. So is it realistic? Of course not, right? That it doesn't make a ton of sense, but it looks cool, and that's all that matters. So I'm going to angle it a little bit and bring it up, just so I could kind of pretend that it's coming from some sort of a sunlight, like so.
There's a quick question, which I think is an interesting question. Can I ask why there's a dominating red ambient light in that foreground in the shadows? Is it LED or color grading preset?
I think that's actually just a little bit of light, and she is predominantly red. I don't actually think that's any light or particular red light. I think that's just a lot of red. It might be the post process. I know that I do put a little bit of red in the red shadows.
Yeah, we do tint our shadows to be more red.
Yeah, so
in
it
the
might be
post-process.
that. So you can see I am darkening it a bit in the post process, quite a bit. And one of the things that I do in my post process volume is if you go into my gamma here, you go to my shadows, you can see that the reds are lifted 1.43, whereas everything else is 1. So I do always tint my shadows more red, and then I make my highlights more blue. So vice versa, I'll make the shadows blue and then the highlights warmer. So it's good that you're spotting that.
Yeah, it's like that in all our scenes, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have that. So we have this nice light coming in from the back. So right now, I want this to feel like she's going through this magical forest, and you could see she's pretty dark, which is cool, but we want it to be a little bit more stylized. So I'll just come over here, create a light. Let me deselect all this, and let's just go to lights, and we'll go to spotlights. Okay, so now we have a new spotlight here. I'm going to just move my camera around a little bit. And I'll probably place this right above her. Okay. Something like that. I'll bring up the intensity. Now this is supposed to be like light peeking through from above. And currently you can see it just looks like a very strong spotlight. So I want to make sure that I don't actually hit a branch like I'm doing right there. And you can see we have this big shadow here. So I'm trying to find like a real clean area, and that seems like that's pretty good right there. Okay. I'll probably go into my color and tint this slightly bluer, just a little bit. I might change it later. Okay. And then I'll go into my content browser, and I'm going to go to function. I have my light functions, which Tran was talking about earlier.
Yeah, there was a question back there about how the material is set up. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Well, you can show that later. Right now, I'm not
Yeah,
going to
I'll
get
come
into
back
it.
to it.
So I'm just going to grab this light function, and I'll throw that into my light function tab. Okay. I'm going to try a few different ones. So I think I am going to go with this one. And let's close this up. And you can see now she looks like she's going through some, like the light is cutting through some branches or bushes, which gives it a little bit more complexity. Okay. So let's grab that light. That's spotlight 3. Let's put it in here. Right click, convert to spawnable again. So it's only in this one shot. It's not on every other shot. This is just for this one here. So I like that. I want to create another spotlight here, which I'm going to angle like so.
This quick question while you're doing that.
Okay.
Creating animation entirely UE5 or no software. All our animation is mocap.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, most of it. And then we have some animators doing work inside of Maya that we don't have mocap for.
Let's bring this guy down here. And I'm always trying to light from the back to the front, meaning the back of her. Oh, I might have duplicated the light there. I did. So let's zoom in there. And I'm going to crank that light up. Like so. So you can see I'm not lighting it from the front. I'm lighting it from always from the side or from the back or whatever. I don't want to show everything because then there's nothing interesting. And I'm going to make this bluer to kind of suggest that she's in this haunted forest. I'm making this much brighter than it probably should be, but just to show you what I'm doing. And then I'll just bring this down just to the point that you don't see it, but you kind of feel the specular highlights. Maybe something like that. And I'll go into my source radius and soften this so that the shadows are very, very soft and it feels more like a bounce light. And that'll only be in the forest. You can see just enough so that she breaks up some of the lighting. So right click, convert to spawnable so that it's only visible in this one shot. And you can see her forms now read a lot better. I'll bring up the source radius some more, again, just to soften it. And I can bring the intensity up a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look. So you can see out here we get that kind of bluish light coming in from the side, which you could blame on this light in the background there, so it makes sense. Okay, so this light from above, let's go find it. So that was light number 3 with the light function. So I like this, but I think I might have to bring it up a little bit. So you can see that illusion of the light breaking through the canopy is completely faked with that one sunlight, not sunlight, that one spotlight. Okay. And then she comes out here, and this is where we want to really hit her with the light, which we are getting some light, but not enough for my taste. So I like this blue light here a lot. I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm just holding down Alt. I'm going to angle it from behind like that. And I don't want to see it. I just want to feel it just a little bit. Just like that. Grab that light, drag it into our sequencer. Convert to spawnable. So it's only in that one shot. So let's adjust that light a little bit. Bring up the intensity. So it's not that visible here in this angle. So I'm going to angle it a little bit. Crank up the intensity. I think it might be a little too far back. And let's see. Yeah. So I'll bring up the attenuation a little bit. And I'll bring down the intensity. So the worst thing you could do is just grab this light and say, oh, she's so dark. Let me just put a light on her face like that. Because that's just super boring and it's not going to look very good.
And it's not very natural.
It's not very natural. So that's not what we want to do. So we just want to light her with as little light as possible where all the shapes read correctly and everything looks nice, but it's not overlit. Okay, so I'm going to leave this light out here for now. And she comes out, steps into the sun right there. So I made this copy. Bring it up because this is supposed to be our sunlight. Angle it down. Okay, I'm going to change it from blue to a more orangey light. Bring down the intensity. Grab that light, drag it into our sequencer, right click, convert to spawnable so it doesn't show up on every single shot that we have. Let's go in here. Comes into the light. Okay, I think I really like this light from above with the light function. So I might duplicate it and put a second one right here so that there's a little bit more light right there. Okay, so we just duplicated that light. What do we have to do? Drag it into sequencer, right click, convert to spawnable. Okay, good. So let's take a look and see what we have. So I would like to have a little bit more light on her face here, but not so much that it feels like there's a spotlight coming down on her, but more like there's a little bit of light breaking through the trees. So I'm going to duplicate my light with the light function. Let's bring this down. So you can see that there's something there. Brighten this up. And I might just throw a different light function on there. I think that one might actually be fine. So I don't care if it's just for like a frame. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down the intensity. Play that. Okay, so let's take a look at this a little bit bigger. just drag my sequencer out of the way.
Do you have a light function, that light hitting her?
Which light function? What light hitting her?
Oh, there's a light, front light on her, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's totally a light function on that. So out here, and then boom, she's out into the sunlight. Might come over here. And I might just grab another spotlight. And angle it towards her here from behind. Make it very blue. And make it very subtle. Drag that into my sequencer. Convert to spawnable. So again, so it doesn't appear on every single shot. So let's take a look. I might grab that light. And I'll go into my source radius to soften up the shadows. So that's going to kind of kill that off a little bit. Kill that off meaning any shadows, it's going to make them much softer. So I don't want that to look like there's a light source here, just like there's a little bit of bounce light. So you can see she's still dark, but she's not muddy. And there you go. So let's take a look over here. I really like that light in the background. We come over here. So there's a switch off from the light in the back, and then boom, she comes into the light right here. The background is darker there, so that's good that she's a little bit brighter, and then she's all the way in the light. So let's take a look at that. So this is the light coming in. This is our sunlight. I might just go into volumetric here. Let's just see what happens if I bring this up to like 10. Give it a little bit of fog.
Looks much more dramatic. The God rays coming out too, a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm also going to select this backlight that I have here. I'm going to turn on cast volumetric shadows. That way, that light in the back could cast those volumetric shadows, God rays. All right, so let's take a look at what we just did. So we started with this. Very flat, very boring. Now we still have, you know, she's still in the spooky forest, but it's much more theatrical.
And she's feel like she's running through a forest with like light coming in and out.
Yeah.
Between the branches.
Yeah, much more theatrical, much more interesting. So you can see the blue light. Does it make sense? No, but the background is blue. Remember, nighttime is not really blue. That's just something that we associate with nighttime in cinema. Nighttime is black.
Yeah, it's true.
Not that this is nighttime, but it's in a spooky forest.
And so spooky is blue.
Yeah, darkness is blue.
Yeah.
So, because real darkness is pitch black, and it would not make for an interesting movie. And then she comes out here. She gets hit by the sunlight. We have a little bit of the blue sky bouncing on her face there. Again, very theatrical. This is a stylized piece. I don't know if this is what we would do if we were doing something photoreal, but that's why we're not doing a photoreal project. The last thing we did was photoreal, and it's a very different way of thinking. So I like that. So I'm going to save this. I actually do like it. It looks pretty cool. So, all right. So let's go on to, let me see if there's any questions on that so far. They sometimes link the backlight to the characters in a more cartoony style. Yeah, one thing we do have that is very fake is you can see there's always a highlight on her eyes. Well, that's just in the texture, and that's just an emissive texture shade up. That doesn't, that isn't accurate, obviously. In terms of continuity, check out like Avatar one day with a critical eye on the continuity, and you can see that almost every shot is backlit, regardless of where they're rotating. So I do care about continuity in the sense that inside it's blue, outside it's not. That's as far as I care about continuity, and that the sun is coming from the screen right and screen right backish, so over here, which is kind of where we're cheating with this here because there's another entrance on this side. So we're just assuming that this light here is the backside of this little tunnel where there's more light coming in from the light from the sun source that is over here somewhere. But that's it. There is really continuity. You could cheat a lot. Remember, movies are made throughout multiple months. The sun is changing constantly. Things are changing. As long as you follow basic rules like light direction and temperatures, I think you're fine.
Yeah, but like you'll see that in a lot of films anyway, where the light continuity is changing,
Yeah.
but the shots are not, right? Like the editing is,
Yeah.
how you cut is still really good.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that you can have like a light that completely doesn't make sense out of nowhere. You'll have a continuity problem, but subtle stuff like this, I don't think anybody would notice. So, all right, so we have that. So cool. So let me close this up and go to another shot. This shot's less interesting to look at because she's completely naked. So we haven't simulated the clothing yet. But you can see now we're outside. So how do we make this better? So first thing I noticed when I look at this in the edit in particular, so we are doing a post process on everything that is darkening stuff. So I just want to see what it looks like raw in here. Or something like that. I feel that it's the background. I do want the brightness in the background, like the tunnel light that we were talking about, but it looks a little bit muddy. I think I'm going to make some of these lights here a little bit more blue. And I'll leave the one strong light coming in from the side here, which will be this whitish yellow light. But we need to make this background a little bit brighter. Yeah, so let's start with that. So here's like one that I really liked. This is one of my favorite shots in terms of darkness. It's this one here, where it's very dark, but everything that's important is completely visible. At every point, you could see her eyes and what her eyes are thinking. She's rim lit.
Yeah, it's not muddy. It's very easy for those type of scenes to turn muddy. It's very clear.
Yeah, and remember, we are putting a lot of grain on this stuff. So
that's without the grain.
So that's a grain and without the color correction, which I actually really like. one of the things we are doing is all of these shots right now, we're just getting them in lighting, but we're going to re-render everything, like I was saying earlier, with crypto mats and reassemble everything in Nuke. So we'd be able to balance the colors and everything. So, all right, so let's look at this here. So let's see what we got here. So I have this light here, the spotlight, which I'm not really sure what it's doing for this sequence. So I'm just going to hide them for now. I'm just going to hide all the lights actually that I have here. One of the worst things you could do when you're lighting is just start with too many lights. So I'm just going in, looking at my lights. And let's go into my sun. And my fog light. Okay. So that's the fog light there from the back. And then this is my sun here. So let's see what we have. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to rotate this guy around. So you can see the sun is coming in from the side. That's good. I want to see what happens when I rotate it from the back here. So that's from the front. So that's completely from the back there. So I'm going to do something more like that. So there's a weird shadow issue that is happening here that I need to turn off. We've talked about this before. This is a Unreal 5.0 problem that we just have to turn on. This is it right here.
Or turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So that just fixes the shadows on the ground. What's up, Gary? So, all right, so let's see what we have. So I like that. Much nicer. So that's my sun. So I'm going to go into my sun transform and save that position. Okay, so I have that. Cool. So now I'm going to go into my rotation since I rotated it and I have a fog light. I'm just going to make sure that I have the exact same rotation set for that. And I'll just set a transform key here. Okay, so cool. So let's grab a spotlight. It's kind of placed it kind of where I wanted it to start off at. And I'll bring this up. And let's bring up the intensity. I'm going to bring up the intensity of the spotlight to like 200. And I'll bring up the attenuation. Let me just take a quick look at what I'm doing here. You know, the thing about watching a live stream, you're seeing something not pre-planned, so it moves slower, but this is the reality of it. So I'm just going to direct this a little bit more to the front. So I'm adjusting my outer cone angle. So right here. I'll bring this to, I'll go to my volumetrics here. Set this to 100. You see now we have like a close encounters of the third kind. Bring that down. Let's turn on our volumetric shadows. Let's bring down the intensity still. That looks cool, but that's a little too much. That's a little too, there's an alien ship in there. But a little bit is okay. That might still be a little bit too much. But the thing to notice is I'm always trying to make sure that the backlight is the brightest light. So let's go over here. Let me see this question here. That command you're using is the movie render queue. As are you saying, like, can you use that in the movie render queue? I believe so. We haven't put it in the movie render queue. We're just putting it in here, and it seems to be working. So our renders are clean. So all right, so we have that. So here I have a lot of light in the foreground, and I want to see. It is daylight out here, so there's only so much I could do about that. But I want to see if there's anything else I could do. I'm just turning the lights that I have on and off just to see what they're doing. That one seems to be doing all the difference in the world. Okay, so there we have like our rim light on the side. I like that one. So I'm just going to make that a little bit more blue. So that's screen left. So that's a rim light on the right. I'm going to leave that one white. I'll make it slightly more orange. This light, I'm not sure what it's doing.
Here's a question. If you want to make a thin beam of light by the side, which better, blocking it with an object or mask, the light, or with those alphas?
Oh, you mean like if I wanted to like flag this so there was a shadow here, Ahmed?
Possibly.
Well, one of the things I could do is this. I could grab this tree, for example, right here. It's a big one. Now, this is very important. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll move it right off to the side here. To kind of cause that shadow in the foreground. You see that? Something like that. Now, obviously, I just wrecked this scene for the rest of the sequence. I don't want a tree there in every shot. I just want it there to block that light, like what you're suggesting.
Well, he's asking whether we do it with the objects or the light beam.
Well, I think I'm answering it
Yeah.
by doing it with the object. Yeah.
Yeah, with the objects.
But I have done it with a cube or something before. But
Yeah.
here, I think it would look better if it's just a piece of geometry, because it'll have that natural breakup. So again, she still needs to feel like she's walking into the light. We're just putting a little bit more shadow in the foreground. So something like that. Now, again, what's super important is You don't want this tree on every other shot from now on. So I'm going to grab that tree, drag it into my sequencer, right click, convert to spawnable. That means in the next shot, where maybe she's running in that direction, she's not going to hit a tree that isn't supposed to be there. It's basically just acting as a flag, right? So you can see we're getting the nice shadows there. Let's go all the way to the last frame and reframe this a little bit because I'm not so crazy about it there. That looks better there. Maybe put a little bit of light. Oh. So that's giving us some more breakup. So let's take a look. So there's a lot of lights here that don't seem to be doing anything that's really worth keeping. So I'm going to go into my lights here. And you can see that I have a bunch of them that are turned off. So if I have them turned off and I don't even feel like I need them, probably don't need them. So let me just save all real quick. And I crashed.
Yeah, that happens a lot. When you save, it crashes.
Yeah. Not the shadow's going to be more contrasted. No, not necessarily. So yeah, we get crashes like this all the time. It's unrelenting amount of crashes with Unreal 5. So yeah.
It crashes when you save.
Yeah, it crashes when you save. So
there's an update which we haven't updated because every time we've updated it breaks all our lighting, and we're kind of at the stage where like
we can't just
we
throw
can't
another
constantly
week away. Yeah.
yeah, we can't constantly relight our scenes. Like it takes so long to do. So we're just afraid to update because everything we did will be broken and then you have to do it again. So
Yeah.
yeah. Just wait for you to start.
Yeah. So do you want to show something in the meantime?
I don't have any. Well, yeah, I do have something to show.
Okay.
Oops. Let's go over here. There we are. Now I'm not all crazy. So the question that I saw later, I didn't answer it right away because I didn't see the question, was just what the light material is. I already showed this like in a previous stream, but if you're just joining today, basically it's super simple. I like light functions a lot, right? It's basically allows you to put a map into the light.
Like a gobo.
Yeah, like a gobo. So one, you can see here's my mask material. All you have to do when you create a new material is you just select your shader right here, and you want to set this to light function over here. I don't know if you can see that in the stream, but by default, it doesn't say light function. So you just select light function, and that's it, right? Once I do that, the only channel available for me to plug anything in is emissive color. All I have going on in here is pretty simple. Here's my texture, right? And then here's my contrast. And then this is broken out into a parameter that can control in the instance, material instance. And then over here, what this is just allows me to control the tiling. So I have a tiling for U and V, right? So these are converted to parameters, and so is this one. And then all of it just goes into the mist material. This material, this texture here is literally a texture. Is not, anything procedural. I just got it from Substance Painter. I exported it out of there, and then that's it. Let me say no. Then as soon as I create, like, let's say a material instance of that, you can see I have the contrast and the tiling here. So I can control how this tiles, and then I can reduce the contrast. And it works pretty well. Like, at this level, this might be like trees breaking through. For the streaks, I just turn it down lower. So this, as far as how to get light streaks, sometimes we try to get it with objects. I think it's better to get it with objects. It looks a bit more natural. If it doesn't work, then I will just take this light function, which is it's just basically material, and then you just toss it into the light. So if I just grab any light here, like I have a spotlight selected up here, all you do is just go under where light function is, and you can just drag and drop it in, right? So, and we have a couple of different ones. Most of them are some of them I'm using for God ray, some of them we use for the trees, and then just a couple ones that are made to just flicker, which are not flickering right now. Yeah, you can't see it. It doesn't. Before it would flicker, but in the
Press
update,
play doesn't do it up on the top.
play.
Oh, sorry. Some of them have like a play animation.
Well, this one now, you see now it's flickering.
There you go.
But sometimes you don't see it do it. Like, I don't know why, but before it wasn't. And then if I just, it's kind of buggy. If I like do this, come back, now it flickers. Okay. But these are for fires and they're a little bit different. But they work the same. So that's it for how we're doing it. I like to work simple. Anything too complicated is, I don't know, it's too complicated. It's really complicated enough to light something and put all these lights for each unique scene. So whatever works. You ready? Up?
Well, I mean, I'd have to completely start again. I lost everything there, so
Okay.
there's not a lot to do there. So
Yeah, you don't.
yeah,
we
let's
didn't
just open it up for questions, and then we'll see. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that they want us to go over again?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. Are the shadows going to be more conscious? No, you already answered that. It could be animated for flickering. Yeah. So all our fire scenes or our ceremony scenes, if you're joining for the first time.
If you have it, you should just show it.
Yeah, let's show it here. It's loading. Give it a second.
That opened pretty fast.
Yeah, well, sometimes it opens fast, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. I haven't loaded this map for a while. Let me open up my sequence for this one. Ceremony. So if you look up over here, these lights are like, my camera speed's too high. All this pulsing of the light, that's just a light function. This one, I go back to the material, is a little bit more complicated. I can't explain it very well, but I can show you what the mass material does. So it's the same, right? It's set to light function. And then we're using like a time node here, or sorry, up here. This is just throwaway crap.
Can you show before and after any?
Before and after what?
Like that scene without the lights.
Without flickering?
I guess without lights.
Without lights? Okay, let's do that. There's a lot of lights in this scene. I think this scene's kind of slow with it. Give me 1 second. You can see I have a lot of stuff. So this should be controlling most of it. And then what I have left. So I have an HDRI backdrop, which is giving me a very subtle fill. And the post process is doing a lot. So, without it, this should get, starting to darken up a little bit. So I have my post process, which pushes things a little bit darker here. And then I have my little flames here. And if we turn the light on, basically I have all my candle lights that are filling up my scene here. Some background lights. And then the main type of light here. Fire pit light. Back here, because otherwise there's no light. And light that looks like it's coming from my torches. So torch light has, it's just kind of faking certain regions. And then translucent light. So translucent light are lights that I place behind cloth. They're either behind, meaning they're backlighting, like this right here, how this is a light source behind the cloth, or sometimes they hit the cloth, in the front, like this one here. So that one's hitting it, or it's coming from behind. But this one took a little bit of time to light.
Yeah.
And then I have my reverse light, which is just lighting in the reverse. So
show the little walkway too.
Okay. If you look at this way, I don't really have a lot. There's, it's just a couple blue lights up here. So my blue lights are my primary lights. The feeling that we're trying to convey is like, this is like a tent, and moonlight is just kind of streaking inside.
I remember moonlight.
It's not really
in air quotes here.
They're blue, but there's not really blue. Yeah. And then these are my lights in reverse, basically the same. I have my translucent lights that hit the cloth, right? And then just more blue light and little lights. I have a lot of lights, especially for my candles. Like all these little point lights are probably for the candles. We try to use spotlights more, but for the candles, it seems easier. And again, I've already showed this a couple of times in previous stream, but if you're new, you can see some of the sets. Let's get to the hall. It always stops. Right? So this is another set. This is the entrance.
Off topic, have you considered rendering with a path tracer? We've tried it. Honestly, we don't notice that much of a difference on at least our shots.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it doesn't make a difference, but
we haven't done enough tests.
Yeah, I know it makes a big difference on like glass materials. We don't really have glass or anything like that. Like it's much more primitive, simple, basic materials. So a few more other screenshots or just angles that and Miguel will be doing these scenes. Well,
this coming week.
Yeah, you're gonna be moving on to this environment.
Yes, we'll have a lot to show on this stuff soon.
Yeah, but I think that when it came to like doing like the fire or the flickering lights, I noticed there's two ways to do it. Like you could do it in the blueprint, or you can do it a light function. And to me, light function was like so simple. And the other thing I really like about it is, okay, so I have this one material using a time node and some math that I don't really understand. I just looked it up and like, okay, that's cool. I'm not very good at math. I understand this gives me time, right? And once I had that, to come back here, create a material instance. I don't get to see it flickering, which is kind of hard. But let's just make a light here. Sometimes I see the flickering in the material viewer, and then sometimes I don't. And that's kind of annoying. But if I create a light, let's drop in a spotlight here. And let's just make it pretty strong, just so I could see it. Okay. Once I have this light, I can drop in my brand new material instance, this one here, which is this one. Let's create a new content browser because this is a pain. And drop this into the light here as a light material function. So I can really see what it's doing. Right now you can see the flicker. I can control the speed.
Yeah, so that answers a question that Ahmed had, which was, could you set the frames per second to the flickering to 12 frames per second or 6 frames per second? I don't know if it's done by frames.
Yeah, it's just controlled by by a parameter that controls the time, and that, you know, the higher this number is, the faster it is, right? So if I set this to like 0.5, you can see it's slowing down. Right now, the other thing is what happens is it's going from black and white. It's just a map, right? It's just a color, like, you know, now it's white, now it turns black, and then this is just controlling the speed of it. What the contrast does, I added this in. I don't think the fire lights really completely shut off. You just want the feeling of a flame moving around, not like turning on and off. So the contrast can just decontrast it. And what that does when I decontrast it, you can see it doesn't completely shut off, right? If we look here, the region where it's flickering, it's more subtle. So this gives me that control. And this controls the speed. And again, the contrasting is just changing. It's not going from black and white anymore. It's going from like gray to lighter gray kind of thing. And I like this more than trying a blueprint version because I can create multiple speeds, right? Like I have one that's medium, one that's really dramatic, and then I have 5 different subtle ones. And then I just put whatever works for that light. And also, I don't want them flickering at the same time. So by giving them slightly different speeds, they just kind of have a different tempo to how they flicker, which feels more natural. So I like that part of it.
Yeah. I have another thing. If someone wanted to see like before and after lighting, and you're new, let me just show you this. Did you want to show something else? Or?
No.
So let me just make this. So if you look at this, and this is really before and after.
Ni mawindo yangu, ulichelewa tena. Hebu nionyeshe.
This is where we were at just a few weeks ago. So that's that, and now you can see the same thing with the lighting.
Ni mawindo yangu, ulichelewa tena. Hebu nionyeshe.
So pretty dramatic change, and that was just in the few weeks. Obviously, we've been doing the work up to that point, and it just all came together. But at that point, but yeah, you can see it changes quite dramatically. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Cool. Well, guys, that's it for this week. Does anybody have any last questions before we go? Thank you guys for tuning in. Yeah, we appreciate it. Gnomon appreciates it. Thanks to everybody.
and we will be back next week. Thank you for the compliments. We really appreciate hearing that. It is hard to show what we're doing, work in progress, because we're still trying to figure out a lot of this stuff, right? Like, just like going, okay, what are we doing here, and troubleshooting along the way. So, yeah.
Is that, what is this, a unicorn?
What's a unicorn? Oh, well, it looks like No, it's a wolf. It's a howl. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the problem is that you save it and then it crashes on save.
Yeah, the problem is it crashes on save.
Yeah.
So then you try not to save as much because.
Which is stupid, but
Yeah.
so it's all dumb. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gary. Gary's always on here, so that's cool. All right, guys. Well, let me kick this off. Oh yeah, and if you guys want to follow any of our work, just follow us on Instagram here. Half Empty Studios, half Miguel, half Tran. And yeah, we appreciate it. And thanks again. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah.